Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets just keep winning, and the complaints from the pro-tank segment of the fan base keep rolling in. I'll dive into the Nets' recent success and what it could mean moving forward after the theme music. What is up, Nets world? We're back here on the Believe in Nets podcast and the Believe Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. And if you don't already, subscribe to Believe in Nets wherever you get your podcasts. Hit up my YouTube channel at Erik Slater NBA. Subscribe if you enjoy this video and my content. Like it, comment, anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. But on today's podcast, I'm going to be recapping the Nets' recent success and, dare I say, a potential play-in push. That's right, the Nets 6-1 over their last 7 games. I'm going to dive into all of what that means and how the fan base is reacting to it. I had Brian Lewis from the New York Post, friend of the pod, on for a Q&A later in the episode, and we touched on a lot of complaints, a lot of questions, a lot of hysteria about what's going on with this Nets team and the kind of zag of where this team is versus where it was expected to be entering the season. So where we're at, recording this at about 2 p.m. on Thursday. The Nets are coming off a 100-96 win over the Philadelphia 76ers last night. They're 6th in 7 games, as I said. And this is coming after a 2-15 stretch that had seemingly thrown the Nets right back into the mix for top 3 lottery odds. After a recent loss, I think it was last Monday, to the Sacramento Kings. And that's were 2 games out of 3rd place in the draft lottery standings. And it seems like they were going all in towards that direction. They were tanking. Guys had missed extended periods. They traded these guys, and they were really going to make a run at top 3 lottery odds. Nope. They turn around 6-1 over their last 7 games, and now they are only 1.5 games out of the play-in, 10th place in the Eastern Conference. They trailed the Chicago Bulls there, and with last night's loss, they also fall into a tie with the 76ers for 6th in the draft lottery standings. So, obviously, this is not what a lot of Nets fans expected. As I just laid out, it seemed like they were going in one direction, and they've completely, had a pretty improbable turnaround during this stretch where it's featured some wins over some good teams, some wins over some bad teams. So it does not seem like it was anything somebody expected. So just getting into how this has happened before I get into kind of the mechanics of the tank and what this all means and what the intentions of the organization actually are right now, how they've won during this stretch. They're still 26th in offense during this stretch. Their offense has continued to be one of the worst in the NBA, but they are 1st in defense. They had the NBA's best defense over the last 7 games. They're allowing 95 points per game on 41% shooting. They're forcing like 15 or 16 turnovers per game during that stretch. And, when you look at the schedule, as I said, they have 3 impressive wins. They won 2 games over the Rockets and 1 game over the Heat. And then you have 2 wins over the Hornets, and then you have a win over the shorthanded 76ers last night. And the 76ers were without Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, so they were severely shorthanded. The Hornets are a new level of awful, one of the worst basketball teams that I've ever had to watch or cover. But when you talk about this 6-1 stretch, if you look at the stretch before last night, D'Angelo Russell and Cam Johnson, 2 of the guys, the veterans that you would think the pro-tank segment of the fan base would have gripes with being on this roster, they hadn't really played well. The offense was still one of the worst in the league, and they were really just winning off of defense and hustle. So if you're somebody who's anti-tank, there's a story that you could tell yourself of, these guys that everybody's complaining shouldn't be here and say are hurting the tank haven't really been playing well and haven't been having much of an impact during the stretch. So you really can't blame management for this team just playing great defense and, doing these things to gut out these games. But last night was a different story. When you talk about the 76ers game, it was an example of how these guys can hurt the tank and some questionable decisions from management in terms of, are they actually committed to a tank or are they making a play and push? Because in last night's game, D'Lo scores 14 points in the first quarter. He finishes with 22 points on 9 of 15 shooting. He was great all night. Cam Johnson struggled from the field, but he made some big shots down the stretch. And now, and this next one is the really confusing one when you ask me. Nick Claxton was questionable entering this game with an ankle sprain. And as I said, this is a game with the 76ers who are directly behind the Nets in the tank race and are likely going to commit to that direction very soon, are resting Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, as well as Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry also not playing. And the Nets decide to make Nick Claxton available. And then he blocks 5 shots and has an awesome defensive game. And this is where you really, have to start questioning what the Nets management's goals are here, the front office, because the front office is the one that makes these decisions in terms of the tank. I talk about this later with Brian, but organizations tank, players and coaches don't. Front office decides what players are on the roster, and then they decide which players are available on a nightly basis. And you see it with a lot of these tanking teams now, with the Hornets, with the Jazz, with the Wizards, whatever. These teams are holding guys out on a nightly basis. Some of their best players. You look at the Jazz. They have Lauri Markkanen, and they have some of these other guys. You look at the Raptors. They're probably going to stop trying to tank because they just acquired Brandon Ingram. But they have these high level players. The Pelicans have they've been hurt, but they have The bottom line is all these other teams have good players, better rosters than the Nets, but they're holding a lot of these guys out on a nightly basis. And in a game like this last night, it's really where you start to question it. As I said, Nick Claxton being available when all these other guys are sitting for the 76ers. And, I'm not going to have a problem with the players and coaches going out and playing as hard as they can. I don't think anybody should. But as I said, it's on management. And the strategy and the messaging surrounding this tank have been very confusing, because if you look at the timeline of events, the Nets trade Mikal Bridges, obviously, and then Sean Marks goes and he trades 3 firsts in a swap, 2 of which are from the Phoenix Suns and 1 of which are from Dallas, picks that are looking more and more valuable right now, to get back the Nets pick this year and next. And at that point, everyone, including all the fans and all the plugged-in NBA people that I talked to, assumed it was a full-blown tank. And that was reflected in the win total. The win total was 18.5 games. It was the lowest for the franchise in 30 years. Nets have already passed that, and we're at the All-Star break now. They've already passed it. But then after they trade those picks to get back their picks in this year and next, they hold on to Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith into the season. All 3 of them play well. The Nets start the year 9-11, and then that's the stretch that has really put them behind the 8 ball for this whole tank race. And it was pretty evident that Marks didn't expect this, because directly after that, he showed a real sense of urgency by trading Schroeder, who was probably the team's best player up to that point, on the first day of trade season, December 15th, the first day that all these players across the league who signed the previous offseason became available. He traded Dennis Schroeder. The news of the deal actually leaked the day before, on December 14th. That's how eager the Nets were to get him off the roster and get this done. Then they move up Dorian Finney-Smith early, and they bring in D'Lo, who's, an inspiring contract, something they were clearly prioritizing, but replaces a good portion of Schroeder's production. And then Sean Marks made a comment after this to Brian Lewis of the New York Post, who I'm about to have on, signaling that the team was indeed tanking, kind of confirming that this is the direction that they're going. He said, and I quote, "We're building this, and we're building this for hopefully sustainable success. That's what we want. We want to get to that. We're going to have to be systemic with some of the decisions we make, and they may not always be in line with winning the next game or putting the most talent out there." So makes that comment, and it's like, okay, we're going. This is the tank, and that's what's happening. But then, they go into this winning stretch where, as I said, they're playing great defense, but a game last night is really what confuses it for me, because you have games like last night where you're playing a team that's going to be competing with you in the tank race in the lottery odds, and they're resting their top guys, and the Nets play everybody. So, it's the messaging and the signaling behind this have just been confusing, and it really, in my opinion, has signaled a front office that has not been all the way in committed to this tank. If they were, you would have moved off of some of these guys in the summer. You would have done some of these things earlier. You'd be sitting guys more than you are right now. And it doesn't seem like there's really a clear direction between, is this team committing fully to a tank, or is this team making a play-in push? And that's why there's all this hysteria from the fan base and all of what's going on. And if you're asking for my take, I think I've been pretty clear on it, that I think that the tank is the best direction for this team. Now, in that, I try to emphasize that it doesn't mean that the Nets aren't accomplishing anything with these games they're winning. They have a real coach in Jordi Fernandez. They are establishing a way they want to play. They're getting comfortable with certain things. But the way that I look at it is, you look at this roster and, there's not a lot of playoff rotation caliber players on this roster. And the ones that they do have are older and probably not going to be here, during the next iteration of this title team, assuming they were to build this through the draft. So, that's just kind of where I'm seeing it. if this team makes a play-in push and they finish with, the 9th or 10th best lottery odds, they make an exit in the play-in, any perceived benefit that they get from that, it pales in comparison to the prospect of getting top lottery odds and getting a player like Cooper Flagg or like Dylan Harper or VJ Edgecombe or Ace Bailey or whoever you want to name. That should be the focus right now. And while I don't think that it hasn't been a focus for the Nets, it hasn't been the main focus, it seems like, at times. And that's where the problem, comes in for me. And I think it comes in for a lot of the Nets fan base in terms of how they've handled this. So the top lottery odds, it's a thing of the past now. They're not getting them. It's over. They're like 5 games behind the Hornets for 4th place, 2.5 games behind the Raptors for 5th place. Like 5th is the ceiling of where they can get right now. And at this rate, it doesn't even seem like they're going to get there unless they start winning some games. They definitely could, but they're really focused on not falling further, or it was what should be the focus right now. So that's where they're at with the tank. Before I get into the Q&A with Brian, last thing I want to touch on, we did get to ask some players last night about the fan base rooting for a tank and how they felt about that. And there were some interesting comments. We asked Cam Johnson about it, and I don't want anything to get lost in translation, so I'm just going to play the clip right here. This is what he had to say.
Season should be about prioritizing the draft position instead of
We don't care. We do not care what they say about that. Listen, at the end of the day, the 15, 18 guys on this team have a job to do. And our job is to not try to get a draft pick. Our job is simply to win basketball games. The basketball games that are in front of us, and that's what we're going to put our full effort towards. We don't care about all that other noise. We don't care about if that's what they think, then they're not really a fan. You know what I mean? They don't want us to succeed. You're going to ask our own players to lose. We're not going to do that. We're out there to compete to win every game, and we're out there right now to fight back.
And that shouldn't be surprising to hear from Cam Johnson in the sense that they don't care about that and that they're going to play as hard as they can and they're going to do all those things because they're NBA players. They play to win. That's how it goes, especially guys are playing for their livelihoods. They're playing for new contracts, all that. As I said, organizations tank, players don't. I think where Cam got into a little bit of hot water with that is the fan policing and saying that, fans who are in favor of the tank, you're not real fans and all of that. I listened to several fans. I saw the replies. I've heard from several fans who reached out to me after that and were upset about that comment. And, it is what it is. Like, this is what happens when you're in a tanking situation and you're not clear about the direction you're going. And there's kind of this, imbalance and instability within the fan base and the team and all that stuff. It puts players in uncomfortable positions where they're not supposed to be. So some fans were mad at Cam Johnson about that. It is what it is. They're going to try to win. He's playing hard. They're all playing hard, frankly. Jordy's coaching hard. And, that's what they're going to continue to do. It's on management to change it if they want to, salvage whatever they can from this draft lottery and their odds. Nick Claxton also got asked about it. I'm not going to play his answer, but he pretty much said the same thing as Cam, but he had a little bit of a more understanding response and approach and said, I understand where the fans are coming from. I could see why they'd want us to lose this year and all that, but we want to win. So Claxton got praised by some fans for having his understanding of that. At the end of the day, is it that big of a deal? No. I just think it underscores kind of the disparity between where the team is and where the fans are. And I think a lot of that has been, accentuated by the fact that management seems like they've somewhat played this under, down the middle. They've somewhat tried to accomplish, multiple things at the same times, whether it's, getting expiring contracts and trades and holding on to some of these guys longer and, trying to maximize cap space versus fully committing to the tank and doing some of these things. And I'm going to touch on all of that more with Brian. We had a really good talk. We got to a lot of questions. I got to as many as I could. I didn't want to go too long. If I didn't get to yours, I apologize. But I really hope you guys enjoy the Q&A with Brian after a quick break. I'm joined now by the New York Post's Brian Lewis, a friend of the pod's been on here several times. And Brian, we got a Nets Q&A here. A lot of fans, some of which are noticeably angry, have questions about what's going on with this team. And know your time is precious, so don't want to waste too much time with small talk. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to give the question. You can answer it, and then I'll give my take. First question we got here. Why don't the Nets understand how to properly tank? How can they justify trading all that stuff for Houston for an end-of-the-lottery pick? So not wasting any time, getting right into the crux of the issue here.
Well, they didn't trade for an end of the lottery pick. They traded to get their pick back. This isn't a trade that was done after the lottery. It's not a trade that's done on draft night where you know what exactly you're getting, or at least you know exactly what pick you're getting. So I would contend that there's a difference between trading for the number 13 pick or 12 pick or 10 pick or 9 pick versus trading to get your pick back. They did not do the former, they did the latter. Now we'll see where it ends up.
Yeah. And what I would say to that is I agree with you. They traded for their pick back. Now, the question that raises is how committed to this tank were they and where did they expect that pick to end up? I think obviously this hasn't gone the way that people expected it to. I touched on that at length in an intro, but it would seem that even with, how poorly this has gone in terms of the tank, they've sent signals that they've been trying to at least take strides to improve this pick. And if they could obviously have their choice, it would not be at the end of the lottery. So I think that there's a goal here. It just has been somewhat confusing because the way that they've gone about it has been a little bit, some mixed signaling at times. So I just want to ask you before we get into the next question, what has been the most surprising aspect of how they've navigated this tank or, just this season thus far? Because I think a lot of people are confused at this point about which direction they're going or what management's goals are here.
You're asking me the most surprising part of all of this?
Yeah, or the most confusing thing, or just the way that they've gone about this. Has it seemed like mixed signaling to you?
I wouldn't say mixed signaling. I would say if you had asked me in the beginning of the season, did I think that they would have Dorian as long as they had him? Probably not. I probably thought he might be traded a little earlier than that. If you asked me in the beginning of the season, did I think they would win as many games as they did over the first 3 weeks to a month? I would say I was also a little bit surprised. I think we discussed that they had a roster with several legitimate NBA players. That roster was never going to be an 18 or whatever it was, 18.5 or 19 win roster. I think that number was set because many people anticipated them burning it to the ground earlier. But I am moderately surprised at how many games they won over the first 3 or 4 weeks. I wouldn't say I'm stunned that Cam Johnson is still here. He was always, of those three, the most likely to get here, to get past the deadline still in Brooklyn. But as the season went on, it became obvious the odds were greater and greater that he was going to be here. If you'd asked me in September, I said the odds were not great. But if you had asked me on New Year's Eve, I'd say, oh, yeah, now the odds are quite good.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because the Nets won these games earlier in the season more than most people expected, and they got to a point where it didn't seem like there was as much of a benefit to trading him in terms of the tank because the situation kind of at this point is, where it is. And as you said, and I just said, that's a product of them winning more games than people thought they were going to. Some other people in the league, the odds makers, and evidently Sean Marks, because Sean Marks has made some moves to course correct that. And you could say, look, nobody expected them to win this many games, all that. But I would counter by saying nobody should know the team better than Sean Marks. And it's his job to manage it and put it in a position where, it's accomplishing the goal. And after, as this person said, they traded all that stuff to land the pick in this draft. In my opinion, you would think that there would be more measures taken to maximize this draft pick that have not yet up to this point. And we're getting to a point where what's done is kind of done. They can still try to salvage something, but this pick is dropping in terms of lottery odds. And on that note, next question, do you consider this season a success if we get the 9th pick after sacrificing those Phoenix and Dallas picks to Houston? Would this encourage Marks to commit to a brutal tank next year for a top 4 pick where it's another top heavy draft?
I don't know all of the factors that are going to go into that decision, right? I mean, I'm sure there are a number of things that would probably go into making that decision. One, I don't know who they're going to end up with at number if they ended up number 9.
Yeah.
Right. And let's go for the sake of argument that they're, somewhere in that vicinity, right? I think right now their most likely landing spot is 8, overwhelmingly so, right? So let's say that that's where they end up. I don't know all of the factors that Marks would consider. There is, yes, who do you end up with? There is also what's available to you in free agency, right? And we can clearly see that a number of the potential targets are off the board.
We got
right?
another. We got a question about that later, and we'll get into that.
All right. I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah.
But those are considerations, as is, let's be fair, punting the cap space down the road a year till 2026, when there are supposed to be a ton of quality free agents available in the summer. And then there are trades that can be made that can be made with the benefit of your cap space. And you could also do half and half. I mean, it's not impossible to sign a restricted free agent this summer and still save cap space for next summer. That's also not out of the question. So for me to sit here and tell you that the season is a failure because they draft 8 instead of 5, that's probably a little reductive. There are a lot of factors that go into the season.
Yeah, and on the first question of, is this season a success if we get the 9th pick? In my opinion, I'll be a little more blunt than you. I think that if they're picking 9th in this draft, that's a failure in my opinion, because not only does that mean that they didn't secure top lottery odds, like they also fell further than that. Like it would be one thing if they got, the top 3 lottery odds and they fell to 4, they fell to 5. But we're talking about 9th. They gave up what are looking like are going to be really valuable picks in the Phoenix picks in 25, 27, 29, and that Mavs pick in 2029. And to trade all that, basically 4 picks for 2 to get your own back this year and next, the goal should have clearly been to maximize the pick this year, in my opinion. And I don't think that they've taken enough, I don't think they've done enough to do that. And if they end up with a 9th pick in this draft, they could still get a good player. They could still get lucky in the lottery. But if they end up 9th, I don't think that would constitute a successful season, in my opinion, based on what their goals presumably were. Now, does that mean they didn't accomplish anything? No. I mean, they found a really good head coach, which definitely means something. And they've, developed some other players. But, I would think prioritizing that pick was the major goal. And the second part of that, as Brian just said, what I've said is they've been prioritizing flexibility going into this summer. They have all that cap space. They have all these draft picks. If a star becomes available and they want to go that route, they can do that. They could also, on your question of would they commit to a hard tank next year, I would not be surprised if they went that route with all the rookies that they have. And as Brian intelligently pointed out, could roll that cap space over into 2026 when there is a free agent class that the entire NBA is eyeing. So I would think that they're going to be want to set up financially to be in a good position for that 2026 summer. And, a byproduct of that could be another season of tanking where maybe they do commit to the tank more than they did. Maybe they don't. But bottom line is I do think that they're going to want to be set up for that 2026 offseason. Another question of the ilk of how they've managed this tank. Why did they trade for D'Lo after trading Dennis Schroeder? Their moves or lack of moves in season are counter to the tank that they paid great capital for to regain control of their draft pick. Make it make sense.
Well, all right. I want to be very clear. I'm not the Brooklyn Nets Chamber of Commerce. I mean, if somebody wants to, if somebody's not enamored with their plan or how their plan is unfolding, that's certainly their right.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not trying to use a Jedi mind trick or hypnotize anybody. What I would say is, and I will say this with all due respect to D'Angelo, who I think has done a fine job since he. The ultimate goal was not saying, "Oh, we've lost Dennis Schroeder and we've lost our pick and roll engine. We need to go find a pick and roll heavy point guard to replace him." No, he's here because he came attached to 3 second-round draft picks, and the salary slot is an expiring that fit this other slot.
Yeah, that's really
that's the answer to the question. If you want me to make it make sense in a cold, calculating, live long and prosper way, right? That's what it is. He fit. That's why he's here. And he came attached with draft capital. And that's what they've been accruing.
And
they have 31 picks. Now, I get it that there are a number of fans that say the other 30 don't matter. We just care about the one. But that's why he's here.
Yep. Yeah, that's they've been looking for two things. It's been very clear since the summer that they're looking for two things in trades for these veterans that they sent out. And that was draft capital and expiring contracts in order to maximize this cap space that we're talking about now. So that's why they traded for D'Lo, to answer the question. Like, that's, as Brian said, that's the rhyme, the reason, the logic behind it. Now, as I said, not moving off of these guys in the summer, Schroeder and DFS, whether Sean thought it was going to hurt the tank or didn't think it was going to hurt the tank, it did hurt the tank. And to me, it seems like getting expiring contracts was a priority in these trades, which might have led to these guys being on the roster a little bit longer than they might have been otherwise. So in essence, they were prioritizing, it seems like, that cap space and getting expiring contracts and maximizing that. And they might not have thought that, holding on to these guys was going to hurt the tanks. They were trying to accomplish both things, two things at one time, of holding these guys, the tank will be fine, and then we'll get the expiring contracts, and we'll also have that cap space. Now, they got the cap space, but holding on to these guys did hurt the tank because Schroeder and DFS played really well at the beginning of the season. So that goes back to my prior answer of them not taking all the steps to ensure that these draft lottery odds are as high as possible. And you could say, hey, nobody could have foresaw these guys playing this well. Schroeder playing like one of the better point guards in the league the first half of the season, them starting out 9-11. They did, and it hurt this pick considerably. So, they've accomplished some things. The pick has suffered, and that's kind of where it stands. But yes, that is why D'Lo is on this team, and it seems like he's going to be on the team. I mean, we're going to have questions about buyout coming up, so I'll save that for that. Next question. If the Nets don't get a pick in the top 5 of the draft, is it possible that marks in the front office use their cachet of picks to move up?
Oh, goodness.
It's tough to answer right now.
So you're asking me, might he package picks this year in June?
Yeah.
To move up? Of course, it's always possible.
Yep.
But let's be fair. Listen, I'm not going to tell you it won't happen. I'm going to tell you throughout the NBA, it rarely happens.
Yeah.
That is very unusual to see somebody packaging picks. You might see it a little more often in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even call it common in the NFL.
And it's
just a little less uncommon than it is in the NBA.
In the NBA sense, too, it's even more uncommon to see it done at the top of the draft. Like, he's saying, if we don't get a pick in the top 5, can we move into the top 5? I think is the question. And has it never happened? Like the Mavs and the Hawks did it with the Luka and Trey. I think that was a very unusual trade. But usually I feel like when you see people trading up, it's usually packaging some picks in the 20s to, move maybe into the late lottery, which is something the Nets can do because they're going to have maybe 3 picks in the 20s. But if we're talking about moving into the top 5 of the draft, in a draft where there's really like 4 guys that people are eyeing as like the top 4, maybe 5, like that seems much less likely.
Yeah. If they're whatever you said, 8th, 9th, and there is a fan that is holding out hope saying, well, I know nobody's going to trade the 1, but maybe we could package this pick and this pick and we can get Dylan Harper, I think you're holding out for something that's probably unlikely. And I think you are setting yourself up for disappointment if that's what you think is going to be happening on draft night. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm going to say it would be unwise to expect it.
I would definitely agree with that. Next question. If the Nets end up with a pick outside the top 4, do you think Sean Marks' job would be at risk?
I mean, again, if I had any news about either an imminent firing or an extension, I would have reported it.
Yes, I would have done the same. I think we can both say no to this one.
I mean, I don't have any expectation that Sean is going to get fired because of a ping pong ball. I don't think that's in the cards. No.
And if this question is like, do you think he could get fired because he mismanaged the tank? I mean, I don't have anything to say. Like, I don't have any reporting that he's definitely safe, but I would be very surprised if he's fired. And also, we're talking about a guy in Joe Tsai. Like, you were on the beat. I think you remember a while back when the KD, Kyrie, Harden, all that stuff was happening. I think Windhorst had the quote that was like, Joe Tsai would rather see, coach a team that wins 40 games and he's proud of than a team with stars that he's not, proud to be a part of. So I think it's safe to say that he values, to some extent, guys playing hard and, this stuff. So it doesn't seem like them winning games and making a play-in push potentially like they are right now. I'm not saying that he does want it or doesn't want it, but it doesn't seem like something that he's going to hold against the management. Would you say that's fair to say?
I would say that's very accurate.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, that's both how we're seeing that. Next question. Do any of Bojan, DeAnthony Melton, or D'Lo get bought out or waived before the end of the month?
Again,
no reporting, but predictions.
My prediction, if you had asked me again 2 months ago, I fully expected Bojan to get bought out. Now we're at a stage where I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it is. I'll go back to your comments about the timing, right, of the trades and did they wait too long and that influenced something? Well, the timing of Bojan finally getting back out on the court, even if it's doing non-contact work, has made a buyout challenging because the incentive for taking a buyout would be so that he can ride off into the sunset and find himself a new home and play somewhere on a team that's a playoff team or a contending team. You're talking about having to do that by, March 1st? So he would have to be cleared for whatever, 3-on-3, 5-on-5, go through multiple practices. Now, here we are in the All-Star break, and then get out on the court and play. Then negotiate a buyout, clear waivers, and sign by March 1st. And what are we? We're a day from Valentine's Day? Yeah. That's not a lot of time to do all of that. Is it possible that all of that could get done by March 1st? Yes. Is it likely? Every day that goes by where he's not fully practicing makes that exponentially more difficult to get that done.
Yeah, and we haven't heard
anybody expecting a buyout for Bojan. It's not impossible, but every day it gets a lot less likely. Not a little less likely, a lot less likely.
Yeah, and we haven't heard anything that he's practicing, with contact or doing anything along those lines. We've gotten the same updates that he's doing workouts with coaches. He's going through his progression and all that, and that's what it's been at. So until he shows any sign of being able to get on the court and show something, within the next coming weeks, it's unlikely to, expect a buyout. I'll just touch on the next two quickly. DeAnthony Melton, he's out for the season and he has no reason to give any money back to the Nets. So that seems a buyout there seems unlikely. D'Lo, I think it's pretty safe to assume that he's on the team for the rest of the season with how they've talked about him, with how he's talked about them. it doesn't seem like a buyout is something that's in the cards there. Would you agree?
I would agree on both. I don't see any incentive for Melton to give back one penny.
Mm.
And that's, by the way, that's not a recrimination. He earned that money.
Yeah, no.
Why should he give it back? There's no reason for him to give it back. And as far as D'Lo, I mean, he seems happy here. You know, just talking the other day at shoot around with Max. I mean, Max was talking just about how happy D'Lo seemed here. And how he just seems refreshed and a different person and so forth and so on. So I don't have any expectation that he's getting bought out. Mm-hmm. So I would expect him to be here for the remainder.
Yeah, no, I think we're pretty aligned on that. Next question. Do you think this team has any chance of actually signing a star this offseason? I personally don't see why someone would come to the Nets. I think Cam Thomas is good, but I don't see him being a 1-2 punch with any available star player. So pretty much, do you think there's a chance that this team actually signs a star with this cap space this offseason?
Signs? No. I don't even know who would be considered.
There's no one like that.
I mean, maybe I use the word star a little differently than some. I mean, I don't even see an all-star that's available now.
Well, there's two that the two that could be available.
No, okay,
James Harden and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, exactly. I don't wager, as you know, but I would bet whatever pittance is in my wallet that there will be no reunion with either of them. So no. Now, again, we're not talking about trades. You were talking about using cap space and signing a free agent who is a star. No, I don't expect to see that. Just one, because there are so few stars available. I mean, I know Jimmy Butler, was open-minded to taking their money if they wanted to give it to him. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that was a fit from their end.
Of course, he was open-minded to taking their money. He was like, "You want to offer me $60 million a year for 3 years? I'll take it." Yeah,
right. And as far as Harden, I don't see that. As far as Kyrie, I don't see that.
Yeah, I have.
And the other players that are available, I don't know that you would consider any of them stars. Some of them might have potential to be impactful, but that's not a star.
Yeah, I have the list right here. Bobby Marks did a great job of outlining this and kind of ranked it by tiers. And the players who could be available, going from like all-star to just like starter level guys, it's Harden, Kyrie, Julius Randle, Jonathan Kuminga, and Fred VanVleet, who are both restricted free agents. And then like Nasri, Chris Middleton, Kelly Oubre, John Collins. And, so nobody there that's jumping.
Wait, who else is restricted other than Kuminga?
Fred VanVleet. Or no. Fred VanVleet.
He can't. No, he's not restricted.
He has a team option.
Yeah.
But
Kuminga's restricted.
Yeah, like Josh Giddey is restricted too.
Yes,
Cam Thomas
Josh Giddey is restricted.
With the Nets is restricted. But like none of these guys are star players. And
Santi is restricted.
Santi is restricted also. He wasn't on this list for some reason. So yeah, like if you're talking about
player, I like him actually.
Yeah, like Kuminga and Santi are the guys I guess that they could make a run at and they could try to pry away in restricted free agency. You'd think that those teams, Kuminga with the Warriors is a little murkier. You'd think the Grizzlies would want Santi back after the year that he's having. But those guys, you classify them as young rising players, but there's a lot of different interpretations of the word star as you put it before. And I don't know if you'd consider those guys stars. So if they're going to get a star player, it's far more likely to be via trade than it's for free agency. Because that's just the way the league is now. These guys aren't hitting free agency. Like it's just the way that things go. These guys want to get their money and then they request trades if they want to get out. And that's the way that it's going. So the 2026 offseason, maybe that could be an exception because there's just so many guys and that class is loaded. But this offseason, it doesn't seem like there's going to be like a guy that hits the market that's like that. So, that's kind of I know you got to get out, Brian. I want to try to squeeze in one more question. last one with you. Am I wrong to question Jordy as a coach? The organization has an opportunity to obtain a franchise player, yet Jordy is purposely making it difficult by winning meaningless games with players who have no future here. So you take that one.
I'm not even sure how to respond to that.
There's some angry fans out there. Like,
okay, I want to be clear here. His job is to win games.
Yes.
I understand the big picture, and I get it. That his job down the road would be made somewhat easier if Cooper Flagg dropped onto his roster and he had him for 10 years. Who wouldn't want that, right? Or if, he had to suffer coaching Dylan Harper for 10 years instead of Cooper. Yes, obviously, he would love to have the number 2 pick at his disposal or the number 1 pick. But his job is to win games. The player's job is to win games, right? So I certainly don't question a coach for trying to win. And I certainly don't question players for trying to win. That's what they've been doing since they were about the same height as the basketball. That's what they do. Listen, there may be people out there, and I do not delude myself into thinking that many people are reading whatever I'm writing. Okay? But my job, as an example, is to go out and report the news as it relates to the Nets and even the NBA at large. Make it accurate and hopefully get it first. That's it. That's my job. Somebody else may look and say, this guy's a really mediocre beat writer. The Post would be so much better if this guy would just stink just a little more and get it. Right? Then we could get a really awesome beat writer. We could get a really good one who doesn't stink this bad. He's really sabotaging the paper. He should just get beat a little more, and we could go get somebody good, like Keith Pompey down in Philly. We could get Slater in here, right? And we could finally have the beat writer we deserve. I'm not going to think that way, right? And so you asking Cam Johnson to lose, or asking Nick Claxton to lose, or worse yet, because those guys got paid, asking Max, who sweats and struggles to get back after an injury, and bear in mind, only has $100,000 guaranteed on his contract next year, to purposely put bad basketball on tape and lose so that he can be fired and not have a job next year. No, I don't think most players are going to be up for that. And I don't think most coaches will be up for that. And there is an ancillary benefit to having a positive culture around your team and in your locker room. Now, if you can do that, get your positive culture, and simultaneously get a number 1 or 2 or 3 pick, well, now you've hit the jackpot. So I think all of the players understand where the fans are coming from, in that they'd love to see the players that will end up being the core of the team combined with a Cooper Flagg, or combined with an Ace, or combined with a Dylan Harper. That would be the perfect world. But I wouldn't question Jordy's acumen as a coach because he's not willing to throw games. I would just say I would judge Jordy's acumen as a coach based on how well he gets teams to win, or how well he puts players in a position to excel.
This is the state that we're at with the Nets, is a coach coaching a team to perform well above expectations, and the questions coming in are, am I wrong to think that this coach stinks? It's like the wires are crossed in ways which, hey, I'm not like indicting the fan base. I understand the frustration. It's just a difficult situation. And to me, as I said, it goes back to management. I think you and I have both said this several times this season. Organizations, management tanks, players and coaches do not. The way that it could be, organizations tank, they decide who's on the roster, and then they decide who's available on a nightly basis. And the coaches and the players that are available do their best to win the games, which is what the players and the coaches are doing. So, if you're going to direct, if you're a Nets fan out there and you're going to direct ire at anyone, it should be directed at the front office or at ownership. If you're a pro tank fan, the players are going to play, especially when a lot of them, as Brian said, are trying to earn new contracts, especially when in Jordy's case, I know like Brian said, there can be a benefit to getting Cooper and all this stuff for him. He's a competitive dude. He wants to win. Coaches usually don't want tanking records on their their record. And they're usually, players and coaches get to a point where they're really overconfident. So Jordy probably thinks, I can win with whoever you put out there in front of me, like within reason. But that's the way that he looks at it. So, that if we're talking about a coaching situation, if I were a Nets fan, I'd be very happy with what Jordy Fernandez has shown. The management conversation is different. So that's how I'd put that. Before you go, Brian, you said all players understand where the fans are coming from. Do you think Cam Johnson understands where the fans are coming from? What was your reaction to that answer? It's something that I played at the top. I think Nets fans, some had a visceral reaction to it, as I think a lot of us could have anticipated.
I understand that the fan base, or at least a certain subsegment of the fan base, had a visceral reaction to it. I think, and you never really know the guys that you cover. Not really. But by the standards of what I've seen from Cam, that's a visceral reaction from him. I think that is Cam, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think that is Cam probably being somewhat irritated that comes to work and puts forth an effort and whatever. Out of 16 or 17,000 people in the arena, a good chunk of them are actually rooting for them to lose and him to be gone. I think that's probably what that is. I don't think he is naive to it. I don't think he's unaware of it. I think that reaction is because he's acutely aware that they want him shipped out on a rail. Not because they think he's trash. Not because they think he can't play. It's a weird, sick kind of praise. They know he can play. They know he can shoot. They know he contributes to winning. And they don't want to win. So they want him gone. I think that is his visceral reaction to understanding exactly what the fan base thinks right now.
Yeah, and it's as I said, it's just a weird situation. I think with Cam's answer, I think everything he said was fair. I think when you get into where he gets into tricky waters is when you start the fan policing of then you're not a real fan, and that's what I've seen a lot of people in response to the tweets that we put out. People have reached out to me who were upset about it. That's where when you start policing fans and tell people they are fans or they're not fans based on what they want, that's when you get it, into a little bit of tricky waters. Like Nick Claxton got asked the same question, and he said, we want to win. I understand where the fans are coming from, but we want to win. And I saw a lot of fans going, "Oh, this guy's awesome. Keep Clax." People have very strong reactions to this stuff. So I understand where they're all coming from. But it's weird. It's a weird situation, and this is why teams don't want to tank if they don't have to, because it sucks and it puts players, coaches, management all in very awkward circumstances that none of them want to be in. And frankly, it's not what anybody signed up for when they decided to be a professional athlete. You play to win. You don't play to lose. And to have fans of your own team rooting against you is just. It's very strange. And it's been a strange thing, I think, for both of us to cover. But I know you got to get out of here, Brian. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think you just did some of your best work with your metaphor to yourself on the beat about you being trash and the paper wanting to replace you. That was just great stuff. So thanks for coming on as always. And I hope to do it again soon.
That wasn't even a metaphor. I'm sure it was a true story.
There you go. All right, man. I'll see you.
All right. Thank you.
That does it for this episode of Believe in Nets on the Believe Podcast Network, your one-stop shop for everything happening across the sports and entertainment world. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode, everything that I had to say in the monologue and also the Q&A with Brian. I think we touched on a lot and hit a lot of different angles of the situation from the players, from management's perspective, from the fans' perspective also. So I appreciate you guys for listening. As I said at the top, if you don't already, subscribe to Believe in Nets. Go to my YouTube channel at Erik Slater NBA. Like, comment, leave, anything you can do to engage with this is much appreciated as I attempt to grow the audience and grow this channel here on YouTube. You guys can find all my work on ClutchPoints.com, constant news analysis, updates. Also follow me on Twitter at Erik Slater _ live game tweets, press conference clips, injury updates, all that stuff you can find there. But potential play-in push for the Nets coming, I guess. We'll see if that gains clarity, if they start to regress, if management steps in. But I'll have coverage of all of it and more here on Believe in Nets. I'll talk to you guys soon.